Hello, Jeff Dollar again. We left off with the last video looking at some of my experiences at Hyles-Anderson and First Baptist Church. Today, I'd like to look at some of the things which led us out and away from that. As I mentioned before, I was completely dedicated to the program, the practices, and the doctrines at First Baptist in Hammond and the college, Hyles-Anderson College. I didn't have any issues with that at the time. So there was a culmination of events and things which led to my disavowing myself from that system, that program. And what I'd like to do today in this video is to look into that. This is the fourth video of this series concerning the hyper-fundamentalism and the doctrines and practices of that group, and having to leave that group. As I mentioned, I had a few misgivings, but being inexperienced, immature at the time, I wasn't able to really put my finger on them. They didn't affect what I believed in that sense. I just had some things tugging at my heart that were bothering me. That I'd mentioned them in the last video, but I wasn't at the point where I would just get up and leave. I was completely dedicated to the school and the church. So what led to the change was in 1982, I had married my high school sweetheart. She was not from First Baptist. She's not from Hammond. She's here in Pennsylvania. I had dated some girls out there under the pressure of the college. They wanted us to date Hyles-Anderson girls, and I did that for a little while. That didn't work out, and I really felt like that I knew my wife. I knew at the time my girlfriend here. I knew her family, I knew her background. Where these other girls, I didn't know them. My sister had told me some of the things about the girls that she knew that I had dated. I wasn't too impressed. I was a little concerned, and so I went back to my high school sweetheart, patched things up, and we eventually got married in 1982. Now she came with me out here to the college, and there was some things she was fresh to that. The things, the practices, the atmosphere, and all of that was quite a shock to her. Now she had some of that, as I did, in the small church that we were in, but the pressures that were there, the soul-winning techniques and the practices of the foster club, really kind of she questioned all of those things. She went along with it as I did. I was dedicated to it. I think she had some questions. So those things were coming up, and then being married, we had a few children while we were there. 1984, I was working a good job in Chicago at the Amazo Corporation. I don't know if it's still there or not. That was a long time ago, but that job fizzled out, and I was running into some financial issues. That was weighing heavy on us because we couldn't afford the tuition. We could barely afford the rent. And then my son, at the same time, my oldest son, began getting infections, some respiratory infections. So we went to our doctor, and the doctor asked about the church nursery, and of course, the church nursery, there's a lot of people there, a lot of kids, and he recommended that we take our son out of the nursery. So we were in a little bit of a conundrum. What do we do? Because of course you couldn't at that time have the baby in the auditorium. They didn't allow babies. He was about 7-8 months old, so we weren't able to have him in the auditorium. They did have the television sets in different parts of the building that we were able to go to another part, but even there, where we had lots of people, the baby would cause a disturbance, and I noticed that it wasn't quite as welcome. So I went to Dr. Hyles. Wife and I we didn't make the appointment. We waited in line. At that time, they had the lines after, I believe, the evening service. You could wait and talk to Dr. Hyles, or the afternoon service. I can't remember that, but we asked him. We said, Dr. Hyles, we're in a fix here. We don't know what to do. Our doctor says that we're not to take the baby into the nursery, but at the same time, we can't. There's no place for us here in the church. Well, what do we do? And we're having financial issues on top of that. Well, Dr. Hyles said just very quickly said, just obey your doctor. So we said, okay. We walked out of his office, and we said, that means we're going to have to leave. So With the financial issues and the health issues, we decided that we were going to have to pack up and go, at least for now. So my father at the time had a van, loaded up some of our stuff. We followed him home here to Pennsylvania, and we thought, well, I'll get a job for a while, get our finances in order, and then return. That was our goal, was to return. While I was here, I met a fellow who was in a church we were attending, who had attended the Liberty Baptist College, I think it was. It wasn't university back then. And he was attending a little school in my hometown, which I didn't even know was there. I actually delivered papers to it when I was a kid. I didn't know what it was, but we went. This fellow recommended, why don't you take a few classes here? While you're here, you're not wasting your time, and then you'll be able to transfer them and go back to Hyles-Anderson. So that was the goal, and we enrolled there, and I did that. Took some classes. I found, though, however, it's a very different school. At this school, there was a variety of types of people, of Christians. I had some other Baptists as my friend, but there was also people there which came from a background very different. There were some Methodists there. Now, these were fundamental Methodists. There were some Presbyterians, people of a Presbyterian persuasion. There was Independents, and there may have been others. But I found myself that we weren't all of one complete mindset. When I was at Hyles-Anderson, we all followed the same beliefs. You didn't deviate from these things because you couldn't. There was a time before I went to the college there where apparently there was a group of people that were looking into Calvinism. They were, I believe, expelled. Now, once again, I have to verify that. That was something I had heard when I was at college. But here there was a lot of different conversation on different doctrine, different practices, and there were people with different backgrounds. So I was exposed to that. Now, that didn't change me. I still held on to my beliefs of being a fundamental Baptist. I wasn't able to argue with some of these guys very well, but at the time I wasn't very interested in that. We decided at a certain point we're going to try to go back. I heard of a job. There's a fellow by the name of Mr. Sullivan, I believe, that took care of finding employment for students. I called out to the college, and I heard that there was a possible job there. I went back. When I got there, sorry, it wasn't there. So I looked around a while. We're staying with some friends, and we waited a few weeks, and we decided we just have to go back. So we went back. I enrolled back into the school, and we ended up finishing at that school. I got my bachelor's degree in 1987. Not sure what we would do at that time. I was attending a fundamental Baptist church. I was preaching off and on. I was driving their church van and helping with their bus ministry and things like that. So we didn't know what we were going to do, but then I received a possible call from a church in Maryland. This church was not a fundamental Baptist church. It was a fundamental church. Dr. Hyles had actually preached at this church. It was a evangelical Methodist church. It was very similar to a fundamental Baptist church in many ways. You would not be able to tell the difference except when it came time for baptism. There was a few times there where the pastor, I was a youth pastor when I went there. The few times he had sprinkled. I didn't agree with that at the time, but I was confronted with all of these things. And the time came, I was there for the summer, but I was offered the opportunity to stay longer and become permanent. The only problem was I had to examine my beliefs. There was just certain things with the Methodists that for me to stay there, I would have had to been ordained with that group. They could not ordain me as a fundamental Baptist, so I had to look into the issues which separated us, which really the only thing which was an issue was this topic of baptism, the issue of baptism. I was a person who believed in baptism by immersion only. That was it. I would not baptize by sprinkling. I talked to the minister and I said, well, I'm willing to look into it. He gave me a couple of books. He gave me books by Baptists, and then he gave me books by some of the Methodists. There was a fellow by the name of Church, had a little booklet that had been reprinted, and I looked at those issues. I looked at books by John R. Rice and some others. I got to the point where in my studies, and I was really confused, because I really felt like that there were some legitimate issues in the scriptures that would point to the fact that you could sprinkle at times. So looking into these issues, I thought, I was being torn apart. I said, look, what am I going to do? I thought, well, I know. I will write a letter to Dr. Curtis Hudson of the Sword of the Lord. He's a prominent Baptist. And I spelled out some of the issues I was having, looking at the Greek and some of these other things. And I asked him, could you please advise me on these things, because I have to make a decision. I'm confused on this doctrine. It seems like that what they have to say is irrefutable. Can you help me? Well, I received a letter back, and he more or less repeated some of the things that there wasn't any substance in his letter that would help me to maintain my position on immersion. And to make a long story short, I really felt like I could then proceed with that ordination with the Methodists. And that's what I did. But I retained everything else in my thinking. I was still a supporter of Dr. Hyles and other things. We took youth out to the youth conference. If you're somebody who was involved, back in those days would have been 89, 90, sometime around there, probably 88 or 89. We had attended. There was a big stink with the us being I think we're the only Methodist group there. And it was publicly known, and some of our kids were goofing off. And if you were there, you probably would have remembered that. But so we still supported. I still supported the ministry, even though I was beginning to go somewhat in a different direction doctrinally. I was challenged in some other ways, though. I was teaching an adult class, adult Sunday school class, and people were questioning some of these things that I believed. And they were challenging me on some areas of eschatology and some areas of even salvation, things like that. Not the major points of salvation, but some of the other points of salvation. I was being questioned. Sanctification. All these things were being thrown at me that I was not prepared for when I had attended Hyles-Anderson. The problem there, just as kind of somewhat of a side note here, the problem there was they taught you what to believe. But when I was there, at least, I was not taught how to believe, how to determine what I believed. I was given things to believe, but I dared not question things. If you question things, there's a possibility that you'd be out. You couldn't approach these people and ask them. I don't know if I believe this. I'm not sure. What are you, a heretic? So you get the picture. I couldn't do that when I got out of there. I had to be able to defend my beliefs, and I couldn't do it. And I was finding myself being changed in certain areas. One of the things was the area of worship and the reverence for God. There was somewhat of a joking type of an attitude when it came to worship at Hyles-Anderson and at the First Baptist Church. I brought that back with me to this church, and I found that it was not well received. The youth group, we took one of the skits from youth conference, and we put it together, got some kids together, and we put that skit on a Sunday night, and we came back just to show the people where we had gone, what we did. One of the fellows, after an older man, came up to me, and he said, Pastor Dollar, what you did there was blasphemy. I said, what? I couldn't figure out, what do you mean blasphemy? We're serving the Lord here. But I found that I was taking some of the things of God and we're making jokes about them. We were taking some of the hymns of God, singing them in a way which were irreverent and things like that. And he felt that was blasphemy. I had to look into that. I see that our time is up, but I'd like to continue this part in our next video as well. These things were tearing at me, and I felt like I'm going to have to make a choice and have to make. I might have to make some changes. I was getting to that point, and we'll continue this with the next video. And thanks again for watching.